Hey guys! So, this lecture will be covering general guidelines that you should follow when you are writing a standard 5 paragraph essay. So, these are some guidelines that you should keep in mind. I'll break each one of these down as we go through each slide. So, I'll basically be breaking it down into different sections, but you want to think about a paragraph structure in this format. So, in the upside down triangle, you can think of that as your introduction. The reason for that is in your introduction, you start with an attention getter, which is something that's really broad, and then you give some background information on your topic, so you are kind of narrowing it down to focus a little bit more on your topic, and then you give your thesis statement, which is the main argument or the main point of your paper. So as you can see, it starts off really broad, and then it becomes more narrow until it reaches the point, and so it's structured like an upside down triangle. Now, each one of your body paragraphs you can think of as being kind of self contained. So, whatever you're discussing in one body paragraph shouldn't be trickling over into the next body paragraph excessively. You could kind of mention it if it makes sense, but generally, you want to keep your ideas organized in kind of like chunks of information. So you'll have your first point that you're discussing in your first body paragraph, and you should try not to let that trickle over into your second body paragraph. So each one of your body paragraphs, again, you can think of as being self-contained. So they're like the rectangles that you see there. And then finally, we have our conclusion. And when you're writing your conclusion, you should start with a brief summary of your main points. So and then you should do other things in your conclusion, like related to society, etc., which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So you're starting out really narrow, where you're summarizing the main points that you made in your essay, and then you are broadening it to relate to society in general. So it's like a right side up triangle. So first, let's talk about the introduction. When you have your introduction, you should start with an attention getter, and your attention getter is something interesting that grabs the reader's attention and makes them want to read your essay. So examples of attention getters might be a question, a shocking statistic, an anecdote, an interesting quote, etc. You don't want to have definitions as an attention getter because it's not that interesting. For example, if I said Webster's English Dictionary defines social media as, that doesn't grab the reader's attention. It doesn't make someone want to read your essay. So I'm going to be going back and forth between my slides and a sample essay to show you examples. I've written an essay on social media, so you can use that as kind of a model for how to write an essay. So in the sample essay, our introduction starts, "Hey babe, I'm heading to bed, love you, TTYL." Imagine seeing this text, then 2 hours later a notification pops up on your Facebook feed. You see your significant other in a club laughing with someone else leaning in too close for comfort. How does one recover from that? Could there be a logical explanation? Is this worth breaking up over? So your attention getter doesn't have to be just one sentence. As you can see here, this entire section is my attention getter. So I've started with a short anecdote, and then I ask questions. So I kind of mixed two strategies together to make it a little bit more interesting. Now, after you have your attention getter, you're going to give some background information. So what you want to do is ask yourself, what does the reader need to know in order to understand your topic? Now, my background information that I've given in this sample essay is, sadly, this is the reality that many couples experience every day. Social media, and Facebook specifically, has become so prevalent in our society that it has infiltrated something we once held sacred, our relationships. So that's kind of giving you a little background information on what the problem is that this essay will be tackling. Now, after I give my background information, the last thing in my introduction will be my thesis statement. So your thesis doesn't always have to appear as the last sentence or two in your introduction, but it should appear there. That's typically where people will be looking for it, and you should have a very good reason. If you choose to put it somewhere else, there should be a very good reason for that. So your thesis is the main point or the main argument of your essay. Now in the sample essay, the thesis that I have here is, in fact, Facebook is now damaging romantic relationships since couples tend to become addicted to presenting an image of perfection rather than living authentically in their relationships. So that is the main argument that this essay will be trying to illustrate. Now the next thing in your essay is your body paragraphs. So every body paragraph should start with a topic sentence. And your topic sentence is basically saying what the main point of that paragraph is. So let's take a look at a topic sentence here. We have, one major way that Facebook is causing strain in romantic relationships is that it warps reality. So that is telling the audience that this paragraph will be talking about how Facebook warps reality and how it's causing a strain on romantic relationships. After your topic sentence, you're going to introduce your audience to your evidence. So what this means is you're basically telling your audience what they need to know in order to understand your evidence. You're giving some context for your quotes. The reason you're doing that is, if I had my topic sentence saying, one major reason that Facebook is causing a strain in romantic relationships is that it warps reality, and then I just jump into Thomas notes and then I have my quote there, that doesn't really make sense. Who is Thomas? Where did we get this quote from? What's going on in the article? To give this quote some context, we do need to have some type of bridge between your topic sentence and your quote. So here, the introduction to my evidence that I have is, on social media, people present the best snapshot of their lives and we compare it to the worst part of our lives. In our analysis of how saturated our lives have become with social media, Thomas notes, and then we give our quote there. So this here is serving as a bridge between my topic sentence and my quote. Next, we have our actual evidence, and this can come in the form of quotes, statistics, paraphrase, summary, and examples. And you want to introduce your quotes with a signal phrase. A signal phrase is just a statement that indicates that a quote is about to come up. So, for example, I have here my signal phrases. In her analysis of how saturated our lives have become with social media, Thomas notes, and then I have my quote. Anything that I'm writing in quotation marks has to be quoted exactly as it was written in the original source. If you're changing anything, then it's no longer a quote, it's a paraphrase, and you basically need to change everything. So you have to decide if you're quoting or you're paraphrasing. Now, you should also include a signal phrase to introduce your quote, because if you don't, then it's called a dropped quote, and that weakens your paper when you have dropped quotes. So you want to give some context for your quote. Now, after we have our evidence, the next thing that we should be including in our body paragraphs is our analysis of the evidence. So basically, you want to explain what your evidence is showing, and you want to discuss how this paragraph supports your thesis. So here I have, as observers, we do not know what's going on behind the scenes. As Thomas continues to note, we might even become obsessed with things that are unimportant and lose our sense of self. It is not difficult to see how this loss of our sense of priorities could transfer over to relationships. And so basically I'm going on to explain, you can read this in your own time, but I'm going on to explain what the quote was saying, and then I'm explaining how the quote and how the point that I'm making in this paragraph, how it comes back to supporting my thesis statement. So after you've discussed your point, you then want to transition into your next paragraph. Your transition could come at the end of your body paragraph, or it can go at the beginning of the next body paragraph. But you do want to have some type of connection between the paragraphs. Sometimes that connection, the paragraphs have an inherent connection, so you don't need to explicitly have a transitional sentence or a transitional word. But oftentimes you might not have that explicit connection, so you would need to include a transition. So here I have ended the paragraph by saying, followers may then like and comment on the couple's pictures and videos, which may further warp the couple's perception that they're happy in their relationship. Furthermore, increasing likes and comments can become the main priority in a relationship. So if you've noticed, I have ended this paragraph by talking about likes and comments, and I've started the next paragraph talking about likes and comments, and I also have a transitional word that shows the relationship between these two paragraphs. My topic sentence for this paragraph is, furthermore, increasing likes and comments can become the main priority in the relationship, and it may even lead to Facebook addiction. So this paragraph is talking about Facebook addiction, and it's talking about the relationship between dopamine release and addiction, and how that is connected to Facebook likes and comments. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight in this paragraph is that I'm discussing multiple articles within this paragraph. So you definitely want to aim for that when you're writing your essay. Try not to have one paragraph dedicated to one article, a second paragraph dedicated to another article, and then a third to another article. The reason for that is your essay might end up feeling very disconnected. So you want to see that connection between articles throughout the essay. So let's just take a look at how that's done. So I said Facebook is not a drug, so how can one become addicted to it? In her analysis of Facebook's effect on the brain, so this here is my signal phrase, Ritvo noted that with 2 billion likes a day and 1 billion comments, Facebook stimulates the release of loads of dopamine, as well as offering an effective cure to loneliness. Dopamine is known as the happy drug. When it is released, so here I am explaining, I'm analyzing the point that I just made. When it is released, the person has pleasurable feelings. So receiving likes on Facebook has the same effect on the brain as eating chocolate, having sex, and using cocaine. It should be noted that dopamine alone does not cause addiction. However, quote, the reward center in your brain releases dopamine in response to pleasurable experiences. This part of your brain is also likely linked to memory and motivation. So this here is the second article that I have used. So I'm not relying on just one article. So one might be motivated to continue engaging in behaviors because they're seeking out that pleasurable feeling. So that's kind of connecting the two articles. And then I have here, how does this all connect to relationships? When a person posts a picture with their significant other and they get hundreds of likes, they get a hit of dopamine. So basically, I have so far discussed the relationship between Facebook and addiction, but I need to bring it back to my thesis statement, which is about relationships. So that's what I'm doing here in this part of the discussion, is I'm showing how this paragraph is coming back to supporting my my thesis statement. Now I did not write the third paragraph, but I did outline it. So my topic sentence here is, when partners in a relationship have different perspectives of social media and its value, they can begin harboring negative feelings. And I've listed the evidence that I would use in this paragraph. And again, if you read this evidence and you compare it to my thesis statement, you'll see that the evidence is supporting my thesis. Now, finally, we have our conclusion. So in your conclusion, you should definitely briefly summarize the main points that you made in this essay, but you're using different words. You're not restating your thesis exactly as it was written. You should also try not to end your conclusion by saying in conclusion. Your conclusion is the last paragraph of your essay. So if you say in conclusion, it just feels a little repetitive. So you're going to briefly summarize the main points of your essay, and then you want to go beyond that summary and do a few different things. By the way, please note that I have the word brief there. So I've received essays from students where their conclusions have basically been as long as their essay, because they kind of like reset everything that they said in the essay. So you definitely don't want to do that, because your reader is an intelligent person, and they'll remember what they just read, so you don't need to repeat everything. Your summary in your conclusion should be maybe two, maybe 3 sentences if you're pushing it, but it shouldn't be longer than that. You want to do other things in your conclusion to make your conclusion interesting. So remember, your conclusion is the last thing that your reader is going to read. So you want to make sure that you say something memorable so that they'll remember your paper when they walk away from it. So some of the strategies that you can use to conclude are you can discuss any personal connections or opinions that you have to the topic. You can connect the topic to your field of study. So if you're in nursing or whatever your major is, you can show if there is a connection. Obviously, you can show what that connection is. If you are discussing a problem throughout in your essay, then you can offer solutions to that problem. You can also ask rhetorical questions. So rhetorical questions are questions that do not need an answer. They just kind of help the reader to think a little bit more about the topic. So for example, I might ask, should we be a more moral society? So you don't have to answer that question, but you might walk away thinking like, should we be a more moral society, or how can we be a more moral society? And finally, you can connect the topic to society at large and show whatever implications there are with your topic. So you don't want to do all of these things. That will be a very long conclusion if you try doing all of these things. You definitely want to choose whatever techniques work for your essay. And yeah, those are the guidelines on how to write a basic 5 paragraph essay. Of course, if you are writing a longer essay, you have a little bit more flexibility, but you still want to make sure you have, topic sentences, make sure you're analyzing your quotes, you're showing the connection between your paragraph or the point you're making and your thesis statement. These are foundational concepts, so it doesn't really matter how long your essay is. You should still have these elements in your essay.